welcome to week 4 update for the sub 3 hour marathon experiment. And at the end of 4 weeks of training, we've got some interesting and very exciting results in. I'm pretty pumped about this. So let me walk you through the week just quickly, because I've also done another video which has sort of screen captured the data across the 4 weeks to explain a few things. But this week was a pretty straightforward week. I had the Monday off again, which I'm going to continue to do. Today is Monday, so tomorrow morning, being the end of the first 4 weeks, I'm actually going to do the second maximum aerobic functional MAF test according to the Dr. Phil Maffetone's sort of formula that I'm following along with the RK pod training. So I'm really excited to see what the results are tomorrow. I know it's going to be considerably improved on the starting point from December 7th, which had me at an average of 6:24 per kilometre. This week's been really exciting. If you've been following along, first of all, thank you anyone on the Facebook and on the website checking out some of the stuff we've been doing. Really appreciate all the likes on the pages, etc. And we're getting a bunch of questions coming in too, so I'll try and address some of them as we go. This week ran just shy of 6.5 hours, so 6 hours 28 in total time for a distance of 67.6 kilometres. Which is good. And to rewind that a couple of weeks, the very first week I actually ran 6.5 hours and only did 60.9 kilometers. So to go from 60.9 to almost 68 kilometers is a bit over a 10% sort of bump. It's whatever it actually works out, it's about 11 or 12% increase in mileage at the same effort, same heart rate, and look, virtually the same sort of courses I've been running. I do mix it up a little bit for variety. But this week we're pretty much just sort of Tuesday through to Sunday, virtually ran like an hour on most of those days, a little bit shorter on the Saturday, just did the 45 minutes with little man in the pram, and we got up early and had a little run between Burleigh and North Burleigh and back a couple of times. And on the Sunday I did my sort of first, what I would probably call more sort of serious kind of longer run, which went for sort of an hour 50 of continuous running. There might have been one pee break in the middle there somewhere for a couple of minutes, but it was a continuous running for that whole time, through some rolling hills. Most of it was fairly flat, to be honest, and I'm really stoked with some of the time. So what I've been seeing sort of this week, and I guess this is one of the key learnings out of it for anyone that's looking to do the same sort of thing with this low aerobic heart rate, is where I'm seeing the actual bumps. You'll do like an hour run and you might cover, let's say, a couple of weeks ago I was only covering about 9 kilometers. Now I'm covering 11 kilometers in that same time frame, which is quite a spike and quite a bump in distance. So 1.5 to 2 kilometers further at the same effort, which is really good. And obviously to go sub 3 hour marathon, I want to try and get that up, or hopefully my body adapts, I should say, to this aerobic training to get as close to or within earshot of sort of 14 kilometers per hour. Certainly don't expect that to happen at the 138, 140 beats a minute, but I want it to happen within a range that I can then step up to 160 beats at more of a race pace and then sit comfortably at that sort of 14 kilometers an hour plus to be able to go sub 3. So that's really the plan. But this week, a couple of quick examples. On the Wednesday, for example, and I just want to pull up some of the splits here, because this is something really interesting that I'm seeing, and you'll see these all on the blog anyway. But what I'm finding is happening is across the 10k run, first k or so is normally a little bit sort of slower, you just sort of warm up, but as soon as your blood gets flowing, heart and lungs are starting to sort of function and process a bit normally starting to see those couple of the quickest kilometers that happen. But what's interesting is I'm not seeing now, after 4 weeks, I'm not seeing the drop off. It's starting to sort of hold more steady. I'm not slowing down as much as I get towards the end. And the long run on Sunday, where I was an hour 50, was really telling with that, because even sort of at like kilometer 14, 15, 16, where I was back on the flats, it was back down around the 540s again, which is quite an improve from the 620 odds that were a few weeks ago. But what I'm seeing is where to look for improvements, if this is something you're trying yourself, is you'll see a couple of kilometers that just bump up in pace, and it might only be by 5 seconds or so, or sometimes I'm seeing it every now and then, maybe 10 seconds quicker. So this week I saw a couple where I've got sort of 540s, and this is where I was sort of already starting to average 545s again, and then you see a 541, 522, 532, and then it goes back to normal again. And what I'm finding is 2 or 3 days later, if you're consistently running every day, suddenly it sort of pops down and ends up, you know, that 5 or 10 seconds, it adapts, and then suddenly across the whole run, more of those kilometers are starting to be consistent. And really that's the end goal, because obviously I want to get as close to, you know, into the 4-minute Ks as possible, but it's no good if it only does that for 1 or 2 kilometers. We want that to sort of stretch out across, you know, a greater bulk of kilometers, because that's a really true test of what your actual endurance is. So I just thought I would share that. The other thing I've also noticed is that things aren't improving at the same time, and the 3 things that I'm sort of really looking for is heart rate, how it feels in the lungs, the breathing, and how your muscles feel. And heart, lungs and muscles don't improve all together at exactly the same time. So there'll be days where, you know, the legs might be feeling a little bit heavier or a little bit tired, but then your heart rate feels really good and the breathing feels really easy. And then a couple of days later, I'm finding the heart rate's still down at 138, but as my speed has picked up, my lungs feel like they're working really hard. I feel like I'm actually breathing like you're running at a fairly, you know, sharper pace, faster pace. And then a couple of days later, or even sometimes an hour later into the run, your breathing settles down again. So I'm sort of feeling these little adaptations happen from day to day. And then obviously the third one of that is heart and lungs feel pretty good, but then you can sort of really feel the muscles, and then, you know, a couple of days later the muscles feel really springy, and then we're back to sort of heart rate again. So it's not really happening in any sort of real pattern that I can kind of see, but I'm certainly noticing that they're not happening obviously all at the same time, and that makes a lot of sense, because if, you know, if your lungs are kind of working hard and your heart rate is adapted and pulled down, muscles have adapted and kind of sort of pulled down, and they've had their fatigue and they've had their recovery, the lungs are now got to catch up. That kind of makes some sort of sense to me, although I have no science to back this up. But then, you know, the lungs have a harder workout. They have a day or so of recovery as you go through your next runs, and then your breathing feels really easy again, and your legs are working hard, or whatever it might be, as the pace picks up. So given that I've actually improved quite a bit over 4 weeks, and I really didn't expect it to be such a bump, I've worked this out in terms of seconds, and I'll just read this out to you, but at 6 minutes 24, that's actually 384 seconds per kilometre, and somewhere during the last week it's been averaging quite consistently at 5 minutes 45 per kilometre, same effort, same heart rate, and that's 345 seconds per kilometre. So just to work that out, that's an 11.3% improvement over that sort of 3.5 to 4 weeks, which is quite a physiological improvement. I'm really stoked about that, and I don't think it'll ever be bigger than that, purely because as the numbers come down and the pace gets faster, there's going to be less and less improvements. So I fully expect to see just smaller incremental improvements, which is going to be, I think, psychologically a real test of patience as we go through this. And some people are going to go through that where you 3 or 4 days you don't see a lot of improvements, or a whole week you might not see a lot of improvements, and there can be other factors to that. I think, like I talked about in last week's, sleep is certainly one big factor. Whenever I've been a little bit tired and short on sleep, I'm not feeling good, the runs don't feel as good. Although you're still out there doing the Ks, it does take some days before you actually see that show up in the numbers. So still have not done a speed session. I will look to incorporate that in the next couple of weeks. I am feeling a lot stronger and a lot springier in the legs, which is nice, and I'm looking forward to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. But stay tuned, because tomorrow's the MAF test, and I'll obviously publish the results, and we'll have a much more definitive result on what the exact improvement has been over this first 4 weeks. So thanks for watching, and thanks for following along, and if you've got any questions, feel free to flick them through on Facebook or on the blog, and look forward to seeing you at next week's update. Cheers.